There are moments in life when everything changes, when the world as you know it shifts without warning. When the person you've trusted most becomes someone you can't escape. And though you know it's wrong, something inside tells you it's too late to turn back. This is the story of a love that shouldn't have existed, and the devastating consequences when it was exposed. I know it sounds unbelievable, and maybe you're thinking that what I'm about to say is twisted, but it's the truth. For months, my father and I shared something that should never have happened. And just when I thought we had it all figured out, my mother caught us. I grew up in New York, and for me, my father was everything. His cafe wasn't just a business, it was our family's heart. It was where we spent our mornings, where we laughed, where we shared our lives. Edward, my father, was the kind of man everyone admired. He had this quiet strength, a charm that made people want to be around him, and an unwavering sense of loyalty that made me feel safe in his presence. He was always there when I needed him. Whether it was a scraped knee or just a moment where the world felt too big for me, he was the one I turned to. He was my protector, my rock. Growing up, I never questioned how close we were. It was natural, comforting even. I never thought of it as anything strange. My father was my world, and I was his. As a little girl, I would sit in the back of the cafe while he worked, watching him interact with the customers, admiring the way he seemed to hold everything together. He was everything I wanted to be. I remember days when we'd share lunch, just the two of us, and I'd look up at him, feeling like nothing could ever touch us, that we were untouchable in our own little bubble. But as I got older, things started to shift. It wasn't something I noticed at first. At least, not consciously. The moments that used to feel innocent, like a hand on my shoulder or a lingering glance, began to feel different. My heart would race, and I would tell myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking things. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. There were nights I'd find myself waiting for him after closing hours, when the cafe was empty and the quiet set in, just hoping for a few extra minutes with him. And somehow, it wasn't just me. He started to change too. At first, it was small things, an affectionate touch that lingered a bit too long, a quiet moment when our eyes met and held a little too intensely. We didn't say anything. Neither of us did. But we both felt it. I wanted more. I craved more than his protection, more than just being his little girl. I wanted to be near him, to feel his presence in a way I couldn't explain. And somewhere along the way, he must have felt it too. I think, in some twisted way, he craved it just as much as I did. It wasn't something we planned. It wasn't something we talked about. It just happened. Slowly at first, so much so that I didn't even realize what was happening. But the moments kept building, and with each one, it became harder to turn back. Deep down, I knew it was wrong, I knew we were crossing a line we could never uncross, but at the same time, I didn't want to stop it. It felt like a forbidden secret we shared, something that was ours alone. And in those moments, when everything else seemed to fade away, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. It started innocently enough, just a few stolen glances, lingering touches when no one was looking. At first, it was nothing more than fleeting moments I could easily brush off. But before I knew it, those small gestures became a part of every day. We'd spend more time together, sharing little moments that were ours alone, moments that nobody else could see. I didn't realize it then, but the connection between us was growing stronger, more undeniable. There was this tension in the air whenever we were alone. The way he would look at me, the way his hand would brush against mine when he passed me something, it was like a silent conversation between us. It wasn't just the touch, it was the intensity in his eyes, like he was seeing me in a way no one else could. It felt thrilling, like we were part of a secret no one else would ever understand. And I'll admit it. I loved it. I loved the attention, the way he made me feel like I was the only one who mattered. In those moments, nothing else existed. It was just the two of us, and the world outside could fade away. But as time went on, the moments grew longer, more frequent. It wasn't enough to just steal glances across the room anymore. It wasn't enough to just brush hands in passing. The tension, the desire, it started to spill over into actions. We started to do it when Mom wasn't home. It was like a hidden world we created, one that belonged to only us. A secret that we both knew should never be revealed. It was morally wrong, I knew that. I knew the gravity of what we were doing, the lines we were crossing. But the truth was, every moment of it felt so real, so intense. I couldn't push it away. I didn't want to. I enjoyed every part of it, the stolen moments, the hidden affection, the secret that was ours alone. And I could see in his eyes, in the way he looked at me, that he felt the same. He craved it just as much as I did. It was a fire we couldn't put out. It didn't matter how wrong it was all-consuming. And even though I knew it would ruin everything if anyone ever found out, part of me didn't care. I didn't want to stop, and neither did he. I don't know what we were thinking. We never expected my mother to come home early that day. But she did. And everything changed in an instant. We were lost in the moment, completely unaware of time slipping by. We were wrapped up in each other, in the secret we'd been sharing for months. It was like nothing else mattered, just the connection, the passion, the thrill of it all. I never once thought about the consequences. Not once did I consider what might happen if we were caught. But that day was different. We never heard her footsteps. The house was quiet, too quiet. The door opened, and I didn't notice at first. But when I turned, everything hit me like a freight train. There she was, standing in the doorway, staring at us, frozen. Her eyes were wide, filled with disbelief, confusion, and a raw, aching betrayal. I remember the way the light from the hallway hit her, casting long shadows across her face. I could see every emotion pass through her in that split second. It was like her whole world had shattered in front of her eyes, and she didn't even know how to react. I felt my breath catch in my throat, and for a moment, everything seemed to blur. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was trapped in that moment, just as trapped as she must have felt, standing there, trying to process what she had just walked in on. And then, in the silence that followed, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. I wanted to explain. I wanted to scream out, tell her that it wasn't what she thought, that we never meant for it to happen. But the words just wouldn't come. How could they? What could I say to undo everything that had already been done? There was no explanation that would make sense of the situation. The truth was, we had crossed a line I could never uncross. And now, there was no way back. She didn't yell. She didn't scream or cry. She just stood there, frozen, as if the weight of the betrayal was too much to even process. She didn't have to say anything. The look in her eyes, the hurt, the confusion, the absolute heartbreak, spoke louder than any words ever could. It was as if she was trying to understand how something like this could happen, how her daughter and husband could betray her in the most unimaginable way. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that presses down on you, the kind where every second feels like an eternity. And in that silence, I felt every ounce of my guilt and shame rise up inside me. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't bear to see the pain I had caused, knowing I was the reason for it all. The silence grew so loud that it was all I could hear, drowning out everything else. And I knew, deep down, that nothing could ever fill the void that was left between us. She didn't move. She didn't try to stop me when I finally turned away, unable to face her any longer. I wanted to run. I wanted to escape the consequences, to escape the raw truth of what had just been exposed. But there was no escaping it. The damage had been done. The trust had been shattered beyond repair. And as I left the room, I knew that our family would never be the same again. That moment, that painful silence, it's something I can never forget. It's etched into my memory, a constant reminder of the broken trust, the lost love, and the secret that I thought we could keep hidden forever. But we couldn't. We couldn't outrun the truth. My mother left without saying a word. And for days, we didn't speak. I couldn't even look at her, not after what we'd done. Not after everything that had been broken. I didn't know what to do. How could I face her? How could I explain something so twisted, so wrong? I kept replaying that moment over and over in my head, the silence, the betrayal, the look in her eyes that I could never forget. I couldn't take it back. There was no undoing what had happened. I couldn't bring back the trust we had before, and I couldn't take away the hurt that now lived between us. Days passed in a blur. The house felt different, colder somehow. Every time I walked through the door, every time I passed the kitchen where she used to be, I felt the weight of her absence. It was like a dark cloud hanging over everything. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape the guilt that gnawed at me from the inside out. My father, he was there, but I couldn't look at him the same way. What we shared, what we had done, had left me with this overwhelming sense of shame. But at the same time, I couldn't stop feeling what I felt. There was a longing inside me, something that made it hard to breathe, but it was a love I knew I could never have. I'd walk through the house, avoiding mirrors, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Each step felt heavier than the last. The walls seemed to close in on me, and every room felt like a reminder of what had happened, of the secret we'd been hiding. I'd catch glimpses of my father, and it was like I was seeing him through a completely different lens. I still wanted him. That desire, that craving, was still there, even though I knew it could never be. I felt lost. Torn between the man I had loved all my life and the reality that what we shared was something that could never be justified. I thought about my mother every second. I wondered where she was, what she was doing, and how she was coping with what we'd done. I wondered if she'd ever forgive me. If she'd ever be able to look at me without seeing the betrayal in my eyes. I couldn't stand the thought of her pain. But it was my fault. I had chosen this path, and now I had to live with the consequences. There was no escaping the aftermath. No matter how hard I tried to push it all down, to forget about it, it was there, sitting in my chest, suffocating me. The love I felt for my father, the guilt for betraying my mother, the pain of knowing that everything we'd once had was now destroyed, it all mixed together in a constant, unrelenting ache. And then I realized, there was no coming back from this. The family we once were was gone. The connection we had was broken. And all I could do was try to live with the weight of the choices I had made, the ones that had destroyed everything I had once held dear. So, that's the truth. My family, my father, my mother, everything I thought I knew was shattered in an instant. And the hardest part wasn't just the betrayal, it was facing the truth of what we had become. But sometimes, facing the truth is the only way to move forward. The damage had been done, and no matter how much I wished I could take it all back, I knew that wasn't possible. My family was broken, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my own heart. But in the end, the truth is the only thing that can set you free. Even when it hurts. Even when it tears everything apart. And as much as I want to look away, as much as I want to forget, I can't. This is my reality now. It's the truth I have to live with, and maybe that's the hardest part of all. If you've been captivated by this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. More shocking confessions, more hidden truths, it's all coming soon. Stick around, because the journey is far from over. Until next time, remember, we all have our secrets. But sometimes, the hardest part is facing them. If you've ever been faced with a secret you couldn't escape, share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story.